The autumn wind blew gently that afternoon, and the dry leaves danced across the sidewalk as if they too had somewhere important to go. Luis Fernandez, one of the wealthiest men in the country, had decided to go out alone that day. No chauffeur, no bodyguards, no one. Just him, his gray wool coat, and the thoughts that had been haunting him since the death of his wife Mariana 6 months ago. The city felt different since she was gone. The sound of the cars was more distant, the lights less bright, and everything, even success and wealth, felt emptier. Mariana had been his refuge in a world full of masks, contracts, and fake smiles. Now only memories and silence remained. As he wandered aimlessly through the downtown streets, he saw her, sitting on the corner of a busy avenue with an old blanket over her shoulders, messy hair, and a look that was hard to forget. Not because of her beauty, which, though hidden beneath the grime, still lingered, but because of her eyes. That woman had a sadness in her gaze that struck Luis as painfully familiar. He stopped in front of her. No one else did. As always, everyone walked past, pretending not to see the misery. "Do you have something to eat?" she asked in a trembling voice, barely audible over the traffic. Luis didn't respond right away. He opened his wallet, saw the bills, and without thinking too much, pulled out 3 100 notes. "Here," he said, handing her the money. The woman looked at him as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her eyes widened, and for a moment she didn't move. Then with trembling hands she took the money. "Why?" she asked. But he was already walking away. "Because I was hungry once too," he replied without turning around. Night fell quickly, and with it came the sharp loneliness Luis knew all too well. He locked himself in his house, that enormous mansion that now felt emptier than ever, and thought of the beggar, of her eyes, and how something about her face had felt familiar, though he didn't dwell on it. He had helped someone, and for a brief second it brought a feeling close to relief. The next morning, as he did every month, he went to the cemetery. Mariana had hated artificial flowers, so he always brought fresh roses. It was his way of staying close to her, even if the cold marble could never return the warmth of her skin. He walked through the halls of the private mausoleum until he reached her grave. But as he turned the corner, he stopped cold. There she was, the beggar, on her knees in front of Mariana's tombstone, hands clasped in prayer. She was murmuring something, though he couldn't hear what. She wore the same rags as the day before, but something in her posture, in the way she looked at the grave, froze him in place. Luis didn't know what to do. His heart was pounding in his chest. It couldn't be a coincidence. What was that woman doing there? Why at Mariana's grave? He stepped forward, trying to remain calm. "What are you doing here?" he asked in a low but firm voice. The woman slowly lifted her gaze, and when she saw him, she seemed to lose her breath. She stood up but didn't run. I didn't know she was your wife," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't know you were him." Luis frowned. She knew him. She knew Mariana. "Who are you?" he insisted, now closer. The woman swallowed hard. Her eyes filled with tears. "Your wife saved my life once, many years ago. But she also destroyed it." Luis felt the world around him freeze. The woman's words hung in the air like an alarm that wouldn't stop. "What do you mean she saved you and also destroyed you?" The woman lowered her eyes. Her body was trembling, not from cold but from a deep, old fear. The kind that doesn't go away with time. "My name is Clara," she whispered. "Almost 10 years ago, I worked in a private hospital cleaning floors. I was young, pregnant, and completely alone. I had no one. They were about to fire me because I couldn't keep up, until she appeared." Luis narrowed his eyes. "Mariana." Clara nodded. "She was a volunteer at that hospital. She spoke up for me and found me a place in a women's shelter. She brought me clothes, listened to me. She was the only one who did." Luis couldn't believe it, but it didn't sound like a lie either. His wife had always been generous, though reserved. So then, what happened? How did you end up living on the street? Clara hesitated, and for a moment it seemed she wouldn't say more. But something in her face broke, like she could no longer carry the truth. Because she also took away everything I had, or rather what I was about to have. Louise stared at her, not understanding. Clara placed a hand over her chest and her voice changed. My baby never made it. He was taken from me, and all because of a decision she supported. What are you saying? Your wife was on the hospital's board, Clara said, her eyes red. The hospital decided to cut support for single mothers with a history of addiction. I had a relapse years before, and even though I was recovering, they put me on the list. They removed me from the program. They kicked me out without warning. I ended up on the street, no medication, no food. My child was stillborn a month later. She voted in that meeting. I know it. I saw her signature. Louis stepped back as if the ground beneath him shifted. That can't be true. Mariana, she wasn't like that. I'm not saying she was a bad person, Clara whispered. I'm saying that sometimes good people make decisions that destroy lives. She was kind to me, but she also turned her back on me when I needed her most. Luis didn't know what to think. He had idealized Mariana, had placed her on a pedestal ever since her death. But now in front of him stood a hidden face of her story. A painful truth he couldn't ignore. And why were you at her grave? Clara swallowed hard. Because despite everything, I forgave her. Years ago I wanted to hate her, but I couldn't. Not completely. And yesterday when you gave me that money, I realized I was still carrying that resentment. I went to the cemetery to let it go, to tell her I forgive her, and that I hope she forgives me too for hating her so much. Luis remained silent. He had expected many things from that day, but never that the beggar he helped would be a living echo of a forgotten past and an unhealed wound. Clara turned around. Thank you for the money, but even more for listening. No one had done that in years. And then she walked away slowly, disappearing among the cypress trees of the cemetery, like a ghost that had been waiting to be seen. Luis was left alone in front of Mariana's grave, with the rose in his hand wilting in the sun. He didn't move for several minutes. The sun was high now, burning mercilessly on the white stone of the tomb. He still held the rose, but it was no longer an offering. Now it felt like an excuse, something he brought out of habit. Clara's words kept spinning in his mind. She had called her both good and bad in the same sentence. Said that his wife had helped her and broken her. How did that fit with the Mariana he loved? That sweet, generous, just woman? Or had he simply chosen not to see the sharp edges of her personality? That night, Luis couldn't sleep. He sat in his study going through old papers. He dug through emails, meeting notes, anything that might give him something concrete. And then he found it. A meeting minute from 8 years ago. Santa Vida Hospital Board of Directors. Mariana Fernandez present. Her signature was there, on a decision to reduce funding for mothers with a history of substance use. There was a footnote that read, "While I understand the need, I deeply regret this measure. I suggest reviewing each case with compassion." That was all. Luis stared at that document as if it were speaking to him. He had been there. And though she had expressed disagreement, she signed it anyway. Maybe she felt she had no choice. Maybe she gave in to pressure. Or maybe she believed it wouldn't hurt anyone directly. But it did. It hurt Clara. It took away her last safety net. It stole a future that was only just beginning. Luis stood and looked out the window. Out there, everything went on. Traffic, the city, the whole world. But inside him, something had broken. Mariana wasn't the saint his grief had made her out to be. She was human, and like all of us, she had caused harm too. 3 days later, Luis went looking for Clara again. Not on the corner where he'd seen her the first time, she was no longer there, but in community shelters, in soup kitchens, in the attendance records. He found her in a humble church, serving soup to other homeless people. She saw him and froze. Perhaps she feared reproach, but Luis approached calmly. "I want to talk to you," he said. Clara nodded, though warily. They stepped out together into the church's small garden, where autumn leaves kept falling as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. "You were right," Luis began. "I reviewed the documents. Mariana signed. She said she didn't agree, but she signed anyway." Clara lowered her gaze. "I signed things I didn't want to when I was working too. Sometimes, you don't have a choice." Luis took a deep breath. "It's hard for me to see her differently, but I can't deny it anymore. What she did, or what she failed to stop, hurt you deeply. I can't ask you to forgive her more than you already have. But I want to do something." Clara looked up, unsure of what he meant. "I'm going to create a fund," Luis said. "For single mothers, in your name and in hers. Because both of you exist in this story. The woman she helped, and the one she hurt." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do that?" Luis gave a sad smile. "Because helping with money isn't enough. I gave you $300 thinking I was doing something good. But real good is the kind that lasts. And because I want to remember Mariana completely, not as a perfect image but as someone who also made mistakes. As someone real." Clara didn't respond. She just nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. Luis went home that night with a strange kind of peace. It wasn't happiness, but it was something more honest. He knew he would never get Mariana back, never change the past. But at least he could use the pain for something. To heal, even if just one life. And so, the millionaire who once gave away $300 on impulse found in a beggar the last person who would teach him something real. Not about charity, but about redemption.